Right, we are live eventually after a few teething problems. Hello, David Freezer here alongside our Chief Norwich City correspondent Paddy Davitt, and we are shortly back from Colney, where Daniel Farke has been giving his latest team news and the latest on the January transfer window ahead of tomorrow night's FA Cup third round replay at Chelsea. And it seems probably fitting to kick off with Russell Martin, doesn't it, Pad? Confirmed in the last hour that his loan move to Rangers until the end of the season is going through.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much an open secret the last few days. Pictured in Glasgow Airport this morning, doing media as well. We've obviously come away from Colney, so we put that to Daniel. He said, yeah, it's fairly imminent, and it's interesting reaction just on social there in the last sort of hour, maybe 15-30 minutes since it broke. You know, there's a lot now sort of maybe taking a step back and realising what he did for the club, and the influence he had and the loyalty he's shown and his total commitment, you know, irrespective of, you know, maybe in recent times he hasn't been the player he was. The positional change, that was always a bit of a bone of contention to stick to beat him with, but I think there is a bit of a realisation now that, you know, he is one of the integral elements of this journey they've been on really since Paul Lambert's day, and you know, he will be missed around the place in terms of his influence, and Farke acknowledged that. You know, even when he wasn't playing, he was that bridge between the players and the coaches. You know, they brought in a young Irish lad recently, Power from UCD, and Russ was there on hand to show him the ropes as well. So he was taking his club captaincy role still completely seriously, as you would expect, ultimate professional. But I think it's a good move for both parties, really. He wasn't going to get a look in here, that much was clear, and now he can go and play at a decent level in Scotland, and we'll probably reassess in the summer.
It's about as best deal as he could hope for, really, wasn't it? I had a quick look at the Scottish Premiership average attendances. Despite everything Rangers have been through, they're still over 48,000 average, so I mean that is quite something to go and play in front of, isn't it? But also telling from Daniel in the club story, confirming that it was going through, which, as I say, in the last hour, Daniel does mention he's got this loan move, he needed it, but he'll be back in the summer because, of course, he signed a contract last summer, extending his deal until 2019, option for a further year even if they want it. So can you see any realistic hope that he might be involved in the team again at some point?
Well, you can never entirely say, no, that won't happen, because, you know, football, it's so short term that things change and people come and go. But I think the reality is, if he was an integral part of Daniel Farke's plans moving forward, he wouldn't be going to Rangers, he would have played games. So you know, again, with these things, it's not just that relationship, it's what happens with an Ivo Pinto, for example, what happens potentially with anybody else they go and bring in, because I think the reality is now they will need to go and do something in the right back area. Okay, he wasn't really in and around it, but he was still, push come to shove, a right back option. He's now no longer that. Heaven forbid Ivo Pinto gets an injury, because I don't know where they're going to look then. It certainly would be a square peg in a round hole. So I can see him between now and the end of the window doing something in that area. We all know they were linked heavily with the lad at Den Haag, Aboué, who's opted to join Benfica. So I can see them doing something, and that in essence would push Russell Martin even further down the pecking order. So I think it's hard to see a scenario where he comes back and he suddenly becomes a key man for Farke again. I think really, as long as Daniel Farke is here, I don't think Russell Martin will be featuring.
Well, we'll see, but lots of nice things said on social media. I think we can probably put this one to bed for until the summer. Be interested to see how he gets on, of course, with Rangers. They're 11 points adrift of Celtic, so you wouldn't have thought they're going to be challenging for the title, but hopefully he can play regular football, and we'll see where we are in the summer. Lee Fulcher says Graham Murty thinks he could do a job. Of course, Graham Murty was under-18s coach at Norwich only 18 months ago. He was Jamal Lewis's under-18s coach in the FA Youth Cup, and we'll come on to Jamal in a moment because he was up at the presser as well, wasn't he? And James Pegg asks, don't Norwich need at least one striker on a permanent deal? Which leads us on to the next point, which where are we now? We're 6 o'clock, hasn't been confirmed as of yet, but Cameron Jerome expected to be confirmed as joining Derby County on a permanent move. Spoke at length to Daniel about that this afternoon, didn't you? And he seemed to think, well, the general gist was that the amount that Cam has done for the club in the last few years. He deserves to not be kept in the out in the shadows, I suppose. To sum it up, is that fair enough?
Yeah, obviously Russell's only a loan, but both of them, in the sense of what they're given to the club, I think that was something Farke's referenced, that you have to respect these guys, and if they've both come to him and Stuart Webber and said, look, we're not featuring here, we'd like to go and play regular football, you have to take those wishes on board. But with Jerome, I think that makes sense for both parties, really, to get reportedly in the region of £2 million for a player who wasn't really anywhere near it since Nelson Oliveira came back into the side. I think his best days are behind him, if we're brutally honest. That's good money for me, given what Norwich paid for him and what they got back from him. Yes, okay, he might not have been a prolific week in, week out goal scorer, but he was absolutely crucial in that 14-15 promotion winning campaign, culminating with his goal at Wembley. Obviously that then opened up the scenario where he didn't seem to be able to make the step up to the top league and do it on the same basis, but certainly at this level, I thought he was always a very good player for Norwich, and that's, shake his hand and wish him all the best. I'm a little bit surprised why Derby would given Derby seriously in the mix for promotion, why would they look at Cameron Jerome and feel that he could make the difference over these next 6 months potentially? And I guess it's worth a punt from their point of view, because if that was the difference between getting into Premier League and then accessing the Premier League wealth, broadcast revenue, then it makes perfect sense to them. But from Norwich's point of view and from Cameron Jerome's, I think it's the right time to move on, with the caveat that, as the questioner posed there, they need to go out now between now and the end of January and bring in a striker on a permanent deal. I don't think a loan would cut it. And that's going to be interesting, because as we see month in, month out in these windows, top end of the pitch is where the biggest price tags are, so they're going to have to be very creative, I think, to bring in somebody who they feel can score goals, and not 6 months down the line next season, but actually come in, hit the ground running and really put some heat on Nelson Oliveira.
Absolutely. Lee Fulch just follows up there and says 3 strikers needed. I'm not sure we're going to see 3 strikers. I suppose he means three strikers in the squad. Yeah. 3 strikers needed. Wonder if Derby could lend us one. Now, Daniel repeated, as he has done throughout the season today, that Marley Watkins and Josh Murphy are options to play up there as well. You did ask about Stephen Naismith, didn't you? And he isn't part of the squad for Chelsea tomorrow, so despite doing well for the under-23s on Sunday, a couple of goals and an assist, he doesn't come into the team. His future is elsewhere, and we all know that's got to do with wages, isn't it? I suppose from Derby's point of view, Vidra and Winnell have done quite well for them, but Jerome is a different type of player to them, isn't he? And the next facet of that is that Chris Martin is on the books there, isn't he? And he is being allowed out. A lot of people talking about whether he could come back here. I haven't heard any reports that is going to happen, but can you see Norwich being interested in someone on such high wages?
No, you've answered the question there. I think it's pretty clear now that they're going to target players who come within their financial parameters, and I don't think Chris Martin will come into that. And then there's a whole separate debate about whether he's the type of striker Daniel Farke wants. That's interesting for me now, because I don't think Nelson Oliveira necessarily is the type of striker he would ideally see fitting into the template that he wants to play the game. I think he's looking for something a little bit different, and it'll be interesting now who they go and target, because you would think that, given we're starting from a blank sheet of paper in terms of the top end of the pitch, that would give us an indication of what really, in an ideal world, Daniel Farke wants from his. Because ultimately, Oliveira, 1 goal in 7 now, 1 goal in 8, hasn't really convinced that he's the man who can play the manner of what Daniel Farke wants. And he did also broadening out the debate there, went into what Marcus Edwards is going to give him, and he feels he can play in that central role now. Certainly, you look at the stature of that guy, and I don't think he's one you could hit balls up into the air and hope he could battle centre back. So that tells me maybe he wants a mobile, pacing behind, somebody who can really stretch the play. And Oliveira has a tendency to come short. So yeah, I'm interested to see the type of striker that they're going to go for now.
True, yeah, whether it's got a bit of pace. It was interesting how you framed the question on Edwards. As in, is he a direct replacement for Alex Pritchard? And Daniel's general vibe seemed to be that he was maybe better suited, although Alex could play out wide. Yeah. Perhaps Marcus is better suited to it because he's got a bit of pace about him.
He did. Well, he kind of, he basically said Pritchard is your sort of archetypal, clever number 10, playing in them pockets. And also, obviously, Yannick is allowed to go to Cardiff, who is a little bit more agricultural, but certainly direct with pace. And he more or less said that Edwards has attributes from both those type of players. You know, he can play in the clever technical spaces, but he's also got that searing pace by all accounts to stretch the play, and very good in one-on-one situations. So he's certainly got the rep. My concern would be he's a 19-year-old kid who hasn't played any league football whatsoever, and you have to draw a parallel with another young Tottenham lad they brought in under Chris Hughton, who has since gone on to be a superstar, but he was very raw, and you could see that in his play. So yeah, I wouldn't be hanging my hat on Marcus Edwards being the answer to their issues at the top end of the pitch.
Yeah, no, you don't want everyone piling that pressure on. I mean, other than him being part of that England under-19s group which won the European Championships, he's not a player I know much about, so it will be interesting to see how he kicks on. Nick Deal asking about Naismith. The only other thing to add to what we just said is that Daniel said he expects Naismith will go in the next 10 days or so, something like that. No decision made on where he's going, but I think it's all been said pretty much up to this point, hasn't it, that Stephen Naismith's on his way. We did have a rumour shortly, a little while ago as well, coming in, Ashley Fletcher at Middlesbrough. They bought him for a lot of money from West Ham. I think it was a deal up to 8 million, but he's not done the business at all for Borough yet. Is following on from what you just said, do you think that's the sort of deal that it seems likely?
Well, it would be a loan, because if you're talking those sort of telephone numbers, then there's no way. And it would have to be heavily subsidised loan as well, because I'm pretty sure, without knowing the nuts and bolts, that he's on significantly higher wages than most of Norwich's players. So financially, it doesn't seem like that one stacks up. But then if you don't know that from Pulis's side of the fence, if he's desperate to get him out to maybe bring one or two of his type of players in, there might be a deal in the offing there. No, I get the sense that's more Norwich. A creative agent has thrown Norwich into the mix because Norwich are looking for a striker rather than this is the guy they've targeted. I think you look at a deal like Edwards, and that's far more creative than going for somebody who's already tried and trusted to a degree. I mean, he's only 22, isn't he? But you know, he's gone for big money. So I think if they're going to go the loan route in terms of the striker, it'll be another one in the Edwards mould. I don't think it'll be somebody who's already, been transacted for large sums of money. I mean, I did ask him about Abrams. I can't quite fathom why, particularly for tomorrow night, if Oliveira's your only really recognised striker, why you wouldn't take that guy with you. Campbell's been making the bench, and there's a guy who's playing at the same level as him and scoring goals week in, week out. We won't know if he can do it at a high level until he gets a chance. So, to me, it would be a perfect opportunity, not necessarily to play him from the start, I'm not suggesting that, but to get him in and around it. And maybe a bit of an eye-opener about what it's all about, because we keep hearing about this pathway and developing players, and they are doing that. You wouldn't disagree, they clearly are looking to do that, but given that if Jerome isn't involved tomorrow night, Naismith isn't involved, why not take a look at that young man? To me, yes, it'd be lovely to get through tomorrow night, but the bigger game of the week is Sheffield United. Yeah,
Daniel definitely seemed to be of the impression that he's not quite ready for it, didn't he? To chuck him in at Chelsea. Yeah. So Stephen Noakes asks if Nelson Oliveira goes and Cameron Jerome goes, where are we going to get strikers that aren't available for overinflated prices? Now, Oliveira clearly isn't on the verge of leaving at the moment, as far as we know. I can't see them allowing Oliveira to go this month as well as Cameron Jerome, unless they were to get a really good bid, which then allows them to go and buy maybe 2 or 3 lower level players for a few million each. And do you think Nelson's probably here to the summer now, as we sit today?
Well, if there hadn't been the imminent departure of Jerome, I'd say no. I'd say he's definitely going, because the amount of clubs he's getting linked with, it's it's clear there are moving parts to people around him. Maybe there's a bit more than speculation to some of these links from what I'm led to believe. So, but the fact that now Jerome's going, you do not see a scenario where they sanction both their departures and now they're left with no strikers, and Naismith as well, who can do a job at the top end of the pitch. So, all I would say is Stuart Webber doesn't strike me as the sort of bloke who's going to get caught on the hop and Norwich are going to get exposed. you've seen the swiftness with how they let Pritchard go out. Within a week, they've got a lad in who can potentially play that role. So, everything that we've seen from him so far is that he is very big on the strategic, longer-term, medium to longer-term planning. So, I would fully expect that if they've decided Oliveira's surplus to requirements and Jerome, we will be seeing players fetched into the football club fairly swiftly. But here and now, I don't see it, because there's no way you could go into even next 3-4 games between now and the end of the window with no strikers. That makes no sense whatsoever.
No, and on the timeline of things, it almost works nicely from the club's point of view. Players go out, but then towards the end of the window, you've got players coming in. That's probably going to generate a bit of optimism, isn't it? And it's fair to say that's not with everyone. Nigel Springall here. I'd love to know what the board is playing at. Selling players when we're told there's no need to sell anyone. Still 15 days to go. With a youngster loaned in, this board has lost the plot. So Nigel's not feeling in the best of moods, clearly. I mean, the whole issue of Farker and Webber saying we don't need to sell, people seem to be trying to use that as a stick to beat them with, when factually it was correct, wasn't it? At the AGM in November, Steve Stone said we are projected to make a £2 million profit. So financially, they did not have to sell anyone. But we all know there's a great deal of context.
But to be fair, Dave, too, they also said, pretty much following on from that sentence whenever it was uttered, but if we want to do anything this window, we're going to have to sell. Exactly. We're going to have to generate funds. I think in an ideal world, they wouldn't have really wanted to offload Pritchard. I got the sense all the way through that it was more the Jeromes, the Naismiths, the Russell Martins. It was more generating funds from fringe players, whether that be loan fees, whether that be sales in the case of Jerome, and also the wage saving that comes with that. Clearly, the Pritchard sale and the speed with which that came to pass has changed the dynamic slightly, and now maybe they can look to bring in one or two more players for bigger sums than they were envisaging at the start of the window. So, and
that was forced upon them as well, wasn't it? Alex wanted out, so they had to react.
Farker himself said 2 weeks ago he expected to be working with Alex Pritchard through this window and beyond. So that is the speed, that is particularly in this window as well, which is so frenetic because there's only literally a month to trade. Other club, Huddersfield, are clearly desperate to stay in that division. They see Alex Pritchard as potentially helping them achieve that objective. They're going to come and test Norwich's resolve, and I wouldn't hang anybody out to dry for any soundbite about they weren't under pressure to sell, because they're not under any pressure to sell. But as I say, things move fast from hour to hour in this window. So something that was uttered at an AGM is swiftly going to get revised if scenarios are put to them like Pritchard, where they can't do any business. Well, they potentially can do more business than they were envisaging. So, having said all that, Madison. If Madison was to go in this window, then I think the inevitable anger that would unleash, it would be hard to justify that, because to me they've already done the big deal. They've got the revenue in. They don't need clearly to let Madison go, either for financial reasons or for the message that would send to the fan base. So that's going to be an interesting one. But again, if you're a Tottenham or a Liverpool and you come to Norwich with, as was rumoured today in the London Evening Standard, £20 million, that's a huge amount of money for Norwich's board to turn down. So I fear there'll be a few twists and turns on Mr. Madison between now and the end of the window.
Absolutely. I've got a comment here from Ryan Brown which follows on from that, but just to add to what you said, I mean, Jerome, when you actually looked at how often he's played recently, he hasn't started since Bolton at the start of November.
Is that right? Yeah.
2 sub-appearances since. He's not been involved. Supposedly he's had a bit of a back problem, but Martin Naismith not involved at all since that Millwall game. So, these aren't guys who are in the team they have not played a part in this 5-game unbeaten run, which includes holding Chelsea. So, it feels like there's a lot of people who just want to see everything as the end of the world. Perhaps that sort of rolls into this. Sorry, Ryan, but Ryan says, do you think the rumours with Spurs ready to bid for Maddison has any substance in it? If so, how much do you think he's worth? And will we sell if big money offered? Now, a lot of people are putting 2 and 2 together following on from Marcus Edwards, which is another good example of the January transfer window, isn't it? Because for all the links, all the rumours, none of them were including Marcus Edwards. Then bang, you've got him signed on loan from Tottenham. It all happened very quickly. That's how the January transfer window works, isn't it? Do you think there'd be anything in that? Do you think Spurs maybe just dropped him in as a little teaser for Norwich?
Well, I mean, if you get a win-win, then all parties are happy, aren't they? So, you know, I wouldn't think that they basically said to Norwich, "We'll give you Marcus Edwards if we're now front of the queue for James Maddison." I don't think I think it quite works like that. But you know, ultimately, if you treat him in isolation, Marcus Edwards is clearly now at a stage of his career where he needs to get out and play games. Tottenham would have looked at how Farke wants to play, and it's not too dissimilar in terms of how they approach the philosophy of playing football. So, for Marcus Edwards' development, Norwich is a pretty good fit. So, you know, that works on one level. Now, whether there's any, as I say, implied crossover from there into the Maddison pursuit, I wouldn't think so. But what I would say is, when James Maddison was signed by Norwich from Coventry, Tottenham were interested in him. That is a fact, as were Liverpool. So, you know, the idea that Tottenham and Liverpool have only just come out of the woodwork in the last few weeks because they've seen what he's doing, you can disabuse yourself of that notion. He would have been on their scouting radar for now, probably 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer. So, and Pochettino apparently was quoted last month as saying that he is looking for young English talent. That is the way they want to go in their recruitment, and you've seen that with Dele Alli. You know, that's a prime example of what they're trying to do. Now, Maddison would fit that profile perfectly. So, yeah, I mean, basically, if Norwich made it clear that they were willing to listen to offers for James Maddison, then Tottenham and Liverpool would be at the head of the queue. That is obvious. If you want to talk about fees, then I guess it's
football manager rounds.
Yeah, I guess 15 to 20 million for me, really.
Minimum, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because of his age, because of his, as I say, his nationality, and the fact that he's now got a body of work behind him in the Championship that's proved, A, he's good enough for this level, and B, he's probably good enough for the level above, and he's only going to go one way in terms of his development. So, yeah, minimum 15 you start at, with plenty of add-ons, I think.
He's 21 years old, of course, England under-21 international, so he's got everything going for him. A few follow-ups on strikers. Lee Fulcher, will we be looking around the non-league in Germany for replacements? Well, maybe not non-league, lower league, perhaps. Bonnie Bulmer says, yes, we need a striker. Stephen Noakes, thumbs up to German strikers. So, I mean, there's probably a good chance that maybe someone will come in from Germany. Kalle Holmstrom, what about the guy from Peterborough, Marriott? I think it's Adam Marriott, isn't it? Who is top scorer, I think, in
Jack
League
Marriott.
One. Jack Marriott, sorry.
Lakey.
Mr. Lakey, our sports editor, has just shouted across.
No, I've seen, I mean, McCartney, the chairman of Posh, he's no stranger to a tweet, is he? And on one of his many Q&As, I think he basically said they wouldn't consider anything less than 5 to 7 million. And frankly, Norwich aren't going to be dealing in those ballpark figures. So.
Yeah. And he used to play for Ipswich, which I'm not sure most Norwich fans have picked up on.
Fair enough.
But then I suppose if he came and scored goals for Norwich, no one would mind.
I mean, the German market is an obvious one because you know that's where they looked in the summer, isn't it? That's where the link was with the lad at Hernandez before Christmas. That's where the value is, obviously, in terms of your bang for your buck. So yeah, it wouldn't be a huge surprise if the identity of a new striker is sourced from the German leagues.
Yeah, I might have to shout across to Mr. Lakey again here. Callum Smith says Marcus Maddison from Peterborough is who we should get. Chris, he's an attacking midfielder, isn't he, Marcus?
Yeah, scores a few,
yeah.
A few, but probably...
In case you didn't pick that up, scores a few, creates a few, but is what Chris said. But he probably cost a bit of money as well because he's one of Posh's best players. Right, let's move on to the Chelsea game. I think that's all the transfer.
Is there a game?
There is a game tomorrow, Pad. We are going to be travelling down to London. Mick Holland, does anybody know how many are travelling to Stamford Bridge? Don't know officially. I had heard a whisper that as many as 4,000 had been sold. And of course, they were given 6,000 tickets. Then it was announced that it was going to be live on BBC One. So clearly a lot of people are going to stay home on a school night. You're not going to be able to take your kids to West London on a Wednesday night when it's on the BBC. I wouldn't have thought. Team news. I'll let you take that one away, Pad, but there's a few issues, aren't there?
Yeah, there was a trio of fresh concerns, namely Mr. Tete fatigue, which is probably understandable given... we've had probably for the last 2 or 3 seasons, the body of Alex Tete and Norwich's workload usually don't go hand in hand, and the periods of games that he has to miss. so we probably won't see him tomorrow night, with a view to Sheffield United and how important he has been in this run.
Good. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, no,
Saving
that makes sense, particularly as Vrancic is also struggling. Apparently he was laid up all Monday in bed, sickness bug, so he's not going to be 100%. But obviously Tribal's still out and won't be seen until after Sheffield United. He's undergoing a course of injection treatment for his back. So that area of the pitch, they're looking very light. I mean, it's basically Reed is probably the only option to come in, I think. I mean, it sounds like Vrancic will be available. Yeah. He'll be in the squad, but whether he risks him not. And then the other one we didn't know about prior to today is Grant Hanley's had a few issues with his calves. So again, that's one to monitor for me personally. Again, if there's any doubt, don't take a risk. Take him out. Put Sean Raggett in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then other than that, I think Marley Watkins is a bit of good news. He missed out at the weekend with a knee problem, but he's fit and he's available. But no Naismith and no Jerome, to follow on from what we've been discussing. You know, both potentially heading for the exit door, so they won't be involved. And no Abrahams, obviously, either, which is a little bit surprising. But other than that, no other injury or fitness concerns. So, I mean, Daniel did also then go on to say, in an ideal world, he's not looking to make too many changes. So I would think you're probably talking maybe 2/3 changes from Saturday's performance. And, you know, it could be a good time to play Chelsea, as we put to him. You know, 4 games without a win, 3 games without a goal. There's a lot of pressure on Conte there, I would imagine. The league's gone, so, you know, this is an avenue for silverware this season. So, unfortunately, that may mean we'll see Mr Hazard and Mr Morata, which we didn't at Carrow Road. Well, not until late in Morata's case. So, but certainly, I think it's a good time to go there. No pressure on Norwich. In a good vein of form, confidence is high. Go and express themselves like they did at Arsenal. You know, if you get an Arsenal type performance, I think the 4,000 or so who go down there would be delighted with that.
Well, it's going to be difficult, no doubt about that. I mean, the players that they had out on display at Carrow Road, Willian, Pedro, Bakayoko, they're not going to play as badly, you wouldn't have thought, as they did that day. Norwich did a good job, clearly, but they didn't perform as well as they should have done. I think Fabregas, there's a video on the PinkUn YouTube channel now, which has got Antonio Conte's team news in. Fabregas has got a knock, so he's unlikely. Gary Cahill also has a knock and is 50-50. Ross Barkley can't play, who of course they've just signed from Everton for 15 million. He was registered too late, and that applies for Marcus Edwards, of course, who Norwich have signed yesterday, so he now can't be involved in the replay. Mario Vrancic, he may have been ill at the weekend, but he was well enough to speak to Michael after the game, wasn't he? So he can't have been too ill. And they're going to need him. I mean, if you've got Reed available, if Vrancic can't play, then you'd probably have to play Stiepermann in midfield. Yeah, you hit
the nail on the head. I think that might be the way he goes. He's clearly a player he trusts, because whenever he's available, he normally is in the 17 and normally gets himself on the pitch by the end of the game. So I think if you're only making 2 or 3 changes, then you bring Tete out, Vrancic potentially, and you play Reed and Stiepermann. And other than that, I'd obviously Raggett in for Hanley, so they'd be the 3 changes, I think, because you don't want to disrupt it too much, because they are in a really nice vein of form, and the manner of that win at Bristol, you know, those lads will be buzzing, and as you say, live on the BBC, Chelsea, Stamford Bridge, under the lights. Why wouldn't you want to, if you're a footballer? Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to go and express yourself on that stage?
Absolutely. You know, Maddison, Oliveira, all those players, they're going to want to play at Stamford Bridge. I want to go and play at Stamford Bridge tomorrow. You know, always got the boots in the back of the car, just in case, but
we're not that far from the dugouts in the press box either, so you never know, might get a wish.
I'll take them to the press box as well then. But yeah, I wrote about it in the EDP back page of today's Evening News, and I think Farke's got to put what's best for Norwich ahead of, you know, Maddison may want to play in that game, but at the end of the day, for me, the Sheffield United game is much more important.
Yeah, definitely.
But Daniel did make a good point today, I thought, which is that they haven't got a great deal of midweek games coming up. You know, after the Arsenal game was at the end of a real long stint. You know, it was 2 days after they played at Ipswich. There was a lot of games then, but I don't think, off the top of my head, there's a midweek game until Wolves, which is mid-February, is it?
Okay.
So
yeah.
I think he's pretty happy to go pretty much full tilt at this, although he's obviously got some issues anyway.
He has, yeah. I mean, he's certainly brave in his selections. If you go back to Burton over Christmas, he got a lot of flack for that, making 6 changes after probably their most cohesive performance in a long while at Birmingham on Boxing Day. But you know, he stuck to his guns and he got the payoff against Millwall. So yeah, if he feels he can go with it, as you rightly say there, with as many of his frontline options as possible, I think he will. I don't think that by any stretch we're going to see wholesale change. I'll be amazed if it's 6 changes again. As I say, I think 2 or 3 from what he was more or less intimating today. And yeah, I mean, as I say, apart from anything else, you don't really want to make massive changes, then get whacked at Chelsea, because then that will have a negative input in terms of the psyche going into Sheffield United. You want to try and keep it as consistent as possible, and irrespective of the result tomorrow, if they perform well and don't sort of implode, as it were, and are on the end of a heavy defeat, then I think they can roll on into Saturday and Mr. Wilder's return.
On the coach. Nick Outplers asks, can Harrison Reed play an effective defensive midfielder in a 3-4-3 setup? Still got questions to answer as far as I'm concerned. On loan from Southampton, of course. I haven't seen him really as an able replacement for Tetty, but then who is? Maybe Ben Godfrey, but he's obviously out on loan at Shrewsbury until the end of the season. The interesting one will be Raggett for me tomorrow night. I mean, Grant Hanley has been very influential recently, hasn't he? And if he's got a calf knock, then give Sean Raggett a go. I think the chances of Norwich winning this game are slim when you set out anyway. So I would test Sean, see what he can do. But Hanley, you actually gave him your man of the match in yesterday's paper, didn't you? Despite Angus Gunn and James Maddison's heroics, that's how much he impressed you.
Well, I just thought he's particularly that 20-minute spell after half time when Bristol had really upped the ante and there was a lot of balls going into the box, and then towards the end of the game they threw the big boy Aidan Flint up top. But the amount of times Hanley wins those key aerial duels, far post, near post, he just knits it all together. He's just a leader for me, really, and now he's playing regularly. You can see his fitness levels are where they need to be. I thought he was a little bit not quite on it at the start, which was understandable because he came from Newcastle, pretty much had just sat on the bench for a season. But yeah, he looks a very, very big commanding figure, and that's why I wouldn't take any gambles with him tomorrow night. If he's in any way feeling any injury, then don't risk it. But don't risk it because we all know, as much as I take your point, Dave, about the workload isn't probably the same relative as what they had when they played Arsenal, but we all know the end result was 3 or 4 days later, Derby, which we've talked about a lot today, Kent McCarroll Road, and really cashed in. Norwich were very weary that day, and then that was the start of a very prolonged down period in terms of results and performances. We don't need that again, really. So, for me, it's enjoy the occasion, but any debatable calls are on the side of protect these players for Sheffield.
Okay, 30 minutes has flown past somehow, Pad, so we better wrap it up. But just the last few comments. Aston Beals, my opinion on Maddison, get him on a new 2-year deal plus a 30 million release clause. We can't get rid of him yet. He's been excellent form right now. He has been in excellent form right now. We can't get rid of him yet. I think that's probably optimistic. He signed a new contract last summer, so I can't see James committing to anything else. I'm sure that was a good deal for him. Anyway, Paul Jones, enough loans for God's sake, no stability for years now. And I think it was Paul as well I was going to read. I would sell both our strikers. New ones needed to suit our players. We need to buy as well as loan and build a core, which seems a fair point. So we will wrap up in just a minute and we'll finish on Jamal Lewis because he was the player that we spoke to today. First time we've spoken to him since he's broken into the first team. I did speak to him a couple of years ago when City made it to the FA Youth Cup 6th round at Manchester City, and he was an impressive talker then, but he's definitely matured since then, and he is a very confident young man, isn't he?
I want to drop or whatever he's on. I tell you,
yeah,
he is. Well, he's got that fearlessness of youth. He doesn't really know. He's not had any knockbacks yet in terms of his career at the top level. But you can see immediately, literally just 15-20 minutes in his company having a chat, why Farke would have basically come in the summer, and one of his first acts was, as he said to us today, after the first training session, Farke's come over to him and said, "You are now in the first team squad," and you can see. The way he talks is how he plays the game. There's a confidence bordering on arrogance, which I like because if you're going to be too timid, you're going to get eaten alive. As a young player particularly going into the Championship, which is a very, very gruelling league at the best of times. But Yeah, he's in no doubt that he's got an opportunity, he's been given an opportunity, he's been fast-tracked, and he's going to do everything in his power to take it, and that's lovely to see. You know, if Norwich had a few more like him in the academy, then as much as we're sort of worrying about the future in terms of Maddison and what have you, if you've got a few more Jamal Lewis's kicking about, then there's some good times around the corner, I think.
Yeah, well, Jacob, Josh, Angus, Jamal, you know, I suppose they're starting to move in the right direction. But we had a nice line. There was a reason we wanted to speak to Jamal, actually, in that you may have read in the matchday programme on Saturday, I think it was, or maybe for the Chelsea game, actually. He was keen on athletics when he was younger. He was with Luton Town, which is his hometown club, but then he was performing very well at athletics, and he was actually the Southern Area 800 metres champion at under 15s, which is pretty impressive, and he competed at national levels. I think he also finished second in the 800 metres at under 15s at a national level, so high level. But Greg Broughton had been at Luton, was then involved with Norwich City's academy, was head of recruitment for a while, was academy manager for a while. He managed to get Jamal to Norwich, and now Norwich are getting the payback from that. And he actually said some quite impressive stuff about how that had helped him to sort of make the breakthrough as a footballer, didn't it?
He did, yeah. Again, I mean, that's obviously 14, 15 years of age, but the maturity that he must have shown at that time, because he more or less took a year off, it sounds like, from football. And he said it wasn't just to pursue his athletics, it was, you know, so he could get good grades at school and things like that. And you're listening to that and you're thinking, well, that's the level of self-awareness for somebody to basically step away from what could be a promising football career to maybe, you know, take on board the academic side of what he's trying to do and the athletics. But it sounds like, as soon as Greg Broughton approached him again with a view to coming to Norwich, I think his mind was made up then. And yeah, he's just you know, he's just a very impressive young man, really. And yes, there'll be ups and downs, you know, because he's only 19 years of age, and we saw he was in some deep water there at times at Ashton Gate, and, you know, got booked early on, although he contested that today, said it should never have been a booking. But then there's a couple of rash sort of lunges when Bristol were in a really sort of powerful stage in the second half. But, you know, that's inevitable, because but you forget how young he is, because his level of performance. I mean, we're talking about Chelsea tomorrow night. Well, he played against an Italian international at Carrow Road in the first leg, and there was only one winner for me in that battle. So, yeah, as long as he, you know, keeps realising that he's, you know, far from the finished article and keeps working hard, and that he's got good people around him, then, as Ivo Pinto said, I think a week or two about, the sky's the limit for this lad. You know, he will play higher because he's got all the ability, and he seems to have the temperament for it as well.
Yeah, he comes across as someone who's had a very good upbringing. They're like the Murphys, like Nathan Redmond. They always came across very well, didn't they? Right, thanks, Pad. We better wrap it there because, like I say, it's been over half an hour, but plenty to get through at the moment. You can watch that video with Jamal Lewis at the PinkUn YouTube channel and PinkUn.com. Loads to get your teeth into there. All of the details of Russell Martin signing for Rangers, all the match preview. We've also got an eight-page PinkUn special in tomorrow's papers. They do still exist, the papers. I know we do a lot online nowadays, but of course that's still our stock trade. So make sure you pick that up if you're heading down to Stamford Bridge tomorrow afternoon, where me, Paddy and Michael will be as well. We'll catch up with you with our usual team news video, and yeah, we'll see what happens. FA Cup, 4th round, home tie against Newcastle up for grabs for both teams. Will it be Norwich or will it be Chelsea? Cheers.